We should be going live now. Okay, we're live on Facebook. Can you tell? I was trying to find the video so I could share it. But all right, so we're live. We're live. We're actually live, and I'll get to that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sandra Schaeffer. I'm the president of the Democratic Women's Club of Greater Broward, and I have the opportunity today to speak to Stephen Meza. I actually saw him on another panel, and I was like, "Yo, this kid's impressive, right?" Don't mean to call you a kid because I know you're like an adult, but I was like, "You were so impressive that I really enjoyed your spirit, and the fact that you were willing to challenge, someone that's more mature and that's already been in the seat." So I was like, I have to talk to him, and I wanted to also give you an opportunity for you to, really get to develop your platform, because that was another thing that I didn't see happen on some of the other forums, was that you don't get to explain all of what it is that you want to do and what your vision is. So I talk too much already, and I always start off that way. So I want you to introduce yourself to everyone, tell us why you're running, and we're going to try to have a really good conversation today.
All right. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Meza. I am your candidate running for the Florida State Senate here in District 33 in Broward County. I'm 21 years old and the youngest candidate running, challenging our incumbent. I decided to run this year because I believe that Broward County and the state of Florida deserves bold, new progressive leadership to actually bring the change that we're all looking for. And we can only do that by having active and engaged representation. And for me, that was the biggest cornerstone as to why I decided to run this year and then in this particular race, because I want to make sure that we bring that passion and the energy we deserve in our political conversation here in Broward County. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot, so that's a good thing. So tell us, there had to be something that you saw that maybe that your area or your district was missing, or that you think can be improved upon in terms of what services were provided by the present senator. So what is it that you want to do when you get to the Florida State Senate?
So there's a lot of things I want to do, but one of the few things that I really want to make sure we get the ball rolling on is when we win on August 18th, that we start bringing this active and engaged representation back. And that means actually going to meetings, speaking to constituents, making the effort to disseminate the information that matters. And of course, as soon as we get into the legislative session, my hopes are to go ahead and introduce a plethora of bills, introducing a Florida Green New Deal, something that also addresses all of our environmental concerns, making sure that we have proper per pupil spending in our public school education system, proper oversight in regards to our charter schools, and making sure that at the end of the day that we're not using and wasting taxpayer dollars. We're holding everybody else accountable in terms of polluters. We're making sure that the infrastructure is there. We're getting things done. And I want to make sure we have all the progressive values that we're holding now and really shine a light on that for Broward County as a set an example for the state that things are possible and these are things that we can do as a whole together.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to piece up, kind of deal with that in chunks, right? Because you gave us a lot of information. All of it is amazing. So one of the races that's happening this term is you talked about per pupil spending, and so that has to do with the school. So the at-large seat is up in Broward County, right? There are five amazing candidates that's running for that seat. I've had the opportunity to speak to some of them. What is it that you want to do to bring what is it that you want to bring to the students of Broward County that can help, the school board members and the students there? What is it that you want to bring to Broward County?
One of the things that I've noticed that really lacks in our public education system is the money. And that's in terms of how we're programming our education system, how our magnet programs are actually doing, where is the innovation in the education? And a lot of that has faltered throughout the years just because we're not prioritizing our student education as a whole. And it really comes down to money, sadly. But when we're looking at it, we're 45th in the nation in terms of per pupil spending. And for me, that means that we just need to find a way to revamp our education system. And we can by simply, as a state, actually going ahead and creating a grant program for a lot of the magnet programs so they can continue to fund and allocate necessary resources for these programs. And on top of it, to expand a lot of the things that we're lacking in terms of the humanities, music, art. There's so many things that, we neglect in our education system that we're asking the private industries to come in and they're not having the best interest of our community. Other than that, and as well as with the grant programs, for the magnet programs in the schools, I think it'd be in the best interest of the state to provide a teacher's stipend. Teachers are currently going out of their way to pay for a lot of the necessary resources they need for their classroom environment. And I just feel like it's a shame knowing that we're finally giving them the raise they deserve, and they still have to go out of pocket to, really teach the material in a way that's adequate for everybody. So, even small things like this can really help change the narrative about our education system, and it gives us an edge against the charter school system, because the biggest issues currently is the fact that we're providing more into one over the other, and if anything, it needs to be equal. And that's really why money matters in this conversation, especially the oversight in our school system, because if we're just allocating all of our funds outside of the public educational institutions, all we're really doing is lining the pockets of big corporations and people who have no specific interest in the community, just the monetization of it.
Okay, so if someone said, like, how is it that you've come to the conclusion that more money is being given to charter schools than in the public schools? How would you explain that?
So the best way that I can say it is, when we're looking at the charter schools now, we have pop-up charter schools and we have charter schools that are privately owned. A lot of these, and these are statistics that are brand new, if you look, that there's actually a 70% close rate within our charter school system. And that's because a lot of these places, either one, they're not meeting their charter, two, they're not actually adequately providing the education needed as an alternative, and that's specifically what charter schools are, an alternative to our public school education system. And when a lot of these things aren't meeting the criteria, they fall short. So on top of the 70%, consider that 70% of the charter schools that have closed, all of that money could have gone back into our public schools and do exactly what we're hoping to do. If there's something we're lacking, let's reinvest, let's reallocate, say what you want, call it what you need to, but let's find the money and put it where it's necessary instead of taking it out of the taxpayers' pockets. On top of that, I mean, we have to consider also the fact that when we're talking about charter schools, we're not just talking about, choice. We're talking about what is, equitable. Is this choice necessary? And on top of it, is the charter school system working for me and my kids? And that's the biggest questions we have to ask. And money sadly comes into play into all of this, because right now the state of Florida is really using the voucher program to go ahead and fund the charter school system. And they've made it a state mandate that now they have to be equally funded. And a lot of those schools are still up and running, beginner schools. So a lot of them aren't even meeting the capacity. They don't need that funding specifically, again, because it can go back into our public education institutions.
Okay, and the other thing you said that the per pupil spending is lower than most states. How is it? What amount, if you researched this, what amount do you think would be a more suitable amount per student, and where do you think the money, they can find the money in order to properly fund it to the amount that you think is suitable?
So we just, as a state, we finally got the teacher pay back up. So now we're like, if I'm correct, between 10 and 20. So we're in the top 20, let's say.
With teacher pay?
Yes, in teacher pay. Now, teacher pay is allocated within per pupil spending. So however much we're paying our teachers, just kind of allocate that between students. Other than that, though, when we're looking at the money itself, we need to consider how do we reinvest in it. And that's why I bring up the grants, because right now, I believe that the biggest things really lacking in the education system is not only the infrastructure, but how we're providing the resources. So we need to focus on one before the other. And of course, one of them is going to take time, but one we can address now solely through money by providing the necessary funds. Right now, I believe we raised our per pupil spending by like $120 this year, maybe $90. And that leaves us still at around $7,000 to $8,000. When we're looking at the nation and considering that we're one of the biggest economic engines within the United States, we are what, $3,000 short of actually meeting the top 20 at least. And I think that's doable, because we're already competing with states in terms of education like New York and California. If we're going to be on the same scale, I feel like we need to actually put back what actually matters, so we can keep staying competitive and showing that our curriculum is actually advancing and actually adopting new practices and ways of disseminating the information to our new generation. So That's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, but that's a very good answer. I think I got that answer came out better than one that I got from like a school board candidate. So that was some good stuff, right? And I truly appreciate that. And so I'm gonna tell my age a little bit without actually telling my age, right? So you also mentioned that there's more that they can do in terms of bringing the arts and those types of things back into the school, right? So when I was in high school, the Florida lottery came out, right? And when they brought out the Florida lottery, one of the reasons that they convinced people to vote for it was that there's like, oh, it's going to be more money into education. You're going to have school programs and this and that and all these things. And when I was in school, they had like all kind of after school programs. I mean, like everything. I mean, band and the clubs and FBLA and this. And I mean, it was just all kind of stuff. And then slowly they were chipping away. And I know even for like my high school last year, we actually, there were some students that wanted to go to a homecoming game, and we ended up fundraising to get them a bus to get them to go to the game, which was never the case. So is the lottery failing us? Like, why are all the arts like out of the school like that? And I'm going to make one other comment. Like, we've been locked down since March with COVID, and I swear, like, the arts have literally kept me sane, right? Like with music and just stuff that I've been watching and learning. Like, the arts have literally kept me sane. So like, for all those parents who don't want their kids to be artists, they are providing a public service, right? Like, don't sleep on letting your child become an artist, because they've literally kept me sane through this whole experience. So I told my story. Now tell us, like, how do you think we can bring the arts back? Because I really do believe it's important.
So one of the things because when I was growing up, they just rolled out STEM. That, just to kind of share my age again. So when STEM was coming out, a lot of it, like you're saying, I got all the new stuff, all the new toys. And I want you to know my education experience at that moment in time was, I was actually enjoyed it. And that's hard to say for a kid. But when I actually got into high school, and again, like how you were saying, you start to kind of see it erode. And I went to Blanche Ely High School. So we're historically Black high school here in Broward County. And we have, one of the best bands. We're very bold. And
yes.
To kind of see all of that falter. And when I speak to the staff and they say it's because it's not just the generation, it's because there's no funding. There's not people who are willing to commit that time back into it as the staffing. And I completely understand. So for me, I think the best way for us to bring back the music and the arts and stuff, we have to re-incentivize the public education system. It's not about just STEM, because when you look at schools in our county, such for example, like William Dandy, they have a pre-med, and I believe they also have like a pre-law program, if I'm correct. And I mean, those are arts as well. Pre-law and stuff, because these are all literature. These go back to the simplest foundation of things, but it goes ahead and it advances into things that have blossomed over time. And to just basically ask the state to say, hey, we want to go ahead and continue to push these initiatives, but what can we do? Obviously, if I know that we have to balance a budget, but that's where the grants come in, where we can say, okay, you're doing this particular thing, and that's not something wide variety within the county. Let's give you the money so you can stay competitive and have the resources needed to continue what you're doing. I mean, they did it with STEM, and I feel like they can again do it with our arts and humanities. But a lot of it again is just how we have to reinvest and revamp a lot of our grant programs now, because a lot of it addresses culture, a lot of them address infrastructure and new buildings, and that's great and dandy. But we're missing the point, which is how do we educate the next generation and how are they grasping it? Right. I could go on.
No, I'm telling you, no, it's very amazing. And the arts was everything, right? You know what I mean? Just like, you're learning a new language with the music, brain development. I remember, when I was pregnant with my twins, there's like play music for them, it like helps with their brain. It creates new pathways and all of that stuff. So definitely the arts is, like I said, it's literally kept me sane through this whole pandemic. And I really would encourage, really supportive. And I think that's a great idea to try to bring a lot of those programs back into the school. And part of it was that, the students had things to do after school, right? So some of the kids, they, like school gets out at 2:00, not all parents can afford for them to go to aftercare. And before, I mean, you literally could have been in school until like 6:00 in the afternoon in just the clubs and the organization and band practice and all of those different things. And it keeps the students off the streets, right? So, you don't have someone outside getting into trouble, because there's a lot of stuff that's happening on campus that's really beneficial for them.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things, and I want to really highlight, is the fact that these are opening doors to, some people's career goals, some people's aspirations. And again, how it's important to see Black people in a position of power, it's also important to see, again, those same people of color in a whole field that seemed, inevitable to us. And I think that's really important to highlight, allowing people to envision their own future. Because at the end of the day, I feel like that's the whole point of the American dream. What do you see for yourself, and what are the stepping stones here that will get you to where you want to be? And those are just honestly big doorways that need to be reopened so our students can look at themselves and decide what they want. I mean, I remember just being in high school, and advisors can only do so much. You have to find your own way, and these are things that help people find their way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I know that they're from South Florida. I just don't remember what school that they went to, but that group Black Violin, are you familiar with them?
Yes.
And they met each other in a music class at one of the schools in Fort Lauderdale, right, in Broward County. So I think it's in Broward County. So they met themselves in school, and now they're international artists touring, because they learned how to play the violin while they were in school, right? So there's a lot of awesomeness in all of that, right? So education, that's definitely a big ticket item. And I'm sure you've checked the pulse of your community and see what it is that they need. I know one of the things that's always stressful for me is like healthcare, like how to, health insurance, dealing with the marketplace. And I'm like, why Florida? Why don't you want to just take this money to make sure that the people in the state have health care? Is that one of your concerns? And what is it that you think you can do for the people in your district?
Yes, so that's actually one of the biggest, issues, of course, and that's for everybody. And that's just because of our state being a retirement state, but of course, because we have a lot of families and a lot of young people coming up too. So a lot of them are concerned about it. And the biggest thing that I always hear is, why do I keep getting random bills? Why did I go to the hospital, but I'm getting a bill from X, Y, and Z? Did I really need this service? I feel like they were just trying to, make money off of me. So people, don't have a trust in their health institutes. And that to me was a concern. And I wanted to figure out how we can change this. So, I mean, I know everybody knows that Florida is not accepting any federal aid to expand our Medicaid, which is a disservice on itself, but that's a whole nother conversation.
That's right.
But one thing that I've realized, and just kind of studying the legislature, where we no longer have the Speaker in the House, Jose Oliva, but just to set him as an example, the Republicans are on board with changing and revamping our healthcare system. And I think that is an asset to us as Democrats, specifically because our whole platform is about addressing healthcare, but we've never had the opportunity. So I feel like now is the best chance, especially with the coronavirus, because it just has magnified everything. So we need to find a new answer. So for me, I was doing some research and I came across one particular state, Maryland, and they have something called a global payment system. And basically the global payment system is a mandate by the state that allows them to allocate the operational budget for our public health institutions, for example, Broward Health. So basically, they would operate under a state-issued budget. They would no longer have to focus about getting, how can I say it? Making money off of sick people, making money off of the backs of people who are trying to get well. They'll now have to be focused on, we have a budget. I know this person is sick. What is the first and most important thing to address? How do I get them the help they need without wasting the resources we have? And that's technically how doctors should be thinking, because they need to not just look at it from every point of view, but they need to see specifically, well, and this is the point of a doctor, to figure out what is the cocktail or the whole order of things to happen. But there is a better way of doing it, rather than making somebody get a CT scan and then an X-ray and they're almost the same function. But nonetheless though, so it would basically allocate our public health institutions with a set budget. They would basically allow them to start to focus more on the patient health care aspect of it rather than the monetized portion of it. That will also create a comprehensive billing system for all of our constituents. Basically, if you saw 4 doctors in one day and you only went to the ER, all those 4 doctors who are commissioned by the hospital will still be under the same bill with the hospital. You're not going to get 1 now and then 2 later on, which is our biggest concern, making sure we're not in debt. And then, of course, the next thing that it's going to do, it's going to allow the floodgates of the Medicaid funding to come into Florida. And what that'll do is, once we create the global payment system, people can enroll as they are now. And basically their funding would be allocated already into the public health institutions. So it's like they've already paid their portion. So now when they do get the bill, they're going to get a small bill. This will be like their copay in a sense. This is all you owe, but you've technically already been a part of the process without having to do all the grunt work. So now we've made healthcare accessible, easy, affordable, and we're encouraging people now to get the healthcare they deserve by not only saying that here is a whole solution, but you can do it without having to feel a hassle. You can do it without having to feel a burden. And that is really the biggest issue with healthcare, because there's so many middlemen in between. But once you take all of that out, and we can at least allow the state to kind of step in and say, this is what needs to happen. Because I mean, we're already doing it with drugs, we're doing it with insulin and stuff. So I just think we need to take it a step further by, saying, this is what you got, this is what you need to do, and this is how we're gonna do it. And it's a proven study. So I believe it can work just as good for Florida, being that we have a very large retirement population.
So what about the person who said, like, I haven't been to the hospital in 10 years, and now you're trying to get me to pay for some insurance that I may never use? How do you convince that person to buy into this system? Like, I'm a healthy person. I work out 5 days a week. I make sure I take all my vitamins. I ain't going to need to go to the doctor no time soon. Why are you making me pay? And I'm not going to use it.
Mm-hmm. Well, all I would have to say is enroll. And then that's it. You don't have to do anything else. There's no other, random terminology. There's all layman's terms. You understand what you're doing, and simply go get the help you need. And then we'll tell you what we did all in one bill. And then we're going to make sure that you paid the smallest amount possible, because I made sure as the healthcare provider not to do anything that you didn't need necessarily.
So there's no out-of-pocket cost for the person that's enrolling in the program, right? It only triggers if you end up going into the hospital and you need some services. But but there's no payment for them to make on a monthly basis or anything to that fact. Because I get a bill from the marketplace every month that I have to pay, even if I go to the hospital or not, but I'm still paying for insurance every month. So would they pay for insurance every month, even though
no, not necessarily. So okay. From the research and looking into the model that they have in Maryland, the funding from the Medicaid that they're getting and the Medicare, all of that is already going to their future visits. So the same way that the state has allocated the budget, that funding's there already. So the only thing left you have to do as a person, you're going to figure out how much money you put into the system once you enrolled, but then you'll have a small copay. Of course, we're always going to have a copay, but this makes it easy, and it makes it almost as if a single payer system, which is kind of where we're trying to get to with the Medicare for all. But this is a small way of stepping into it and showing people that this is possible, this makes sense, and it works, without making people feel like this is something radical and socialistic, because it's not. It's a social safety net, and we need to have them in place within our society. So again, like the word says, we have a net there in case anything happens. Right. Coronavirus is a perfect example of that. Had we had the healthcare
and it's amazing how big insurance companies have convinced like poor people and just regular folks that they shouldn't want health insurance. Like, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I'm like they're like marketing geniuses as far as I'm concerned, that you've convinced someone who, like, you don't know, like, anything can happen to you. And some of them actually have health issues, like pre-existing health situations, and they're like, no, I don't want insurance, I don't want the government involved in all this. I'm like, this is incredible that they basically convince people who really need health insurance, who really should have health insurance, to not support it, right? So it's definitely so how is it that you would educate your constituents on like how this is beneficial to them, right? Because you're going to represent Republicans and Democrats alike, and people have health issues, and they we need insurance, and a lot of times you get it just in case something happens, right? Because that's why you have insurance on your car. You don't plan on getting into an accident every day, but you have insurance just in case you do, that you don't have to come out of pocket and cover this stuff, right? So how is it that you can educate your constituents on having health insurance is a good thing?
So a lot of the argument is the fact that people feel like the government would take away their choice of healthcare. And that right there is the misinformation.
Yes, absolutely. Because some of them don't even have insurance, so there's nothing to take.
Exactly. So for my Republican constituents, my thing would be, this is your choice. There is nothing telling you are mandated by the state the same way that the ACA is. This is just saying that this is the option here. The state is providing its own healthcare system for you to enroll in. And that's free of charge in terms of enrolling and everything. The only thing you'll probably end up paying is whatever residual balance there is. And more than likely there won't be, because of how this system is intended to work. But for the Democrats, now everybody's on board for healthcare, but I want them to realize too, this is not a socialist agenda. This is not a radical idea. What we're trying to do is secure healthcare as a human right for people, because we're all entitled to know how we're doing, especially where we're living. Things and factors play big roles in our everyday lives, and for us to have, accessible access to the healthcare is important. So one, we have to change what this is looking like for Democrats, because it's not a socialist thing. It's none of that. It is something to help build the infrastructure and the safety net in place for our future. Same way how we have Social Security. And the Republicans, my only thing would be, you have the choice. If you would like to have affordable, accessible healthcare, this is the option I'm telling you. But if you're saying you have the monetary value and worth to purchase a $150 or $200 monthly plan for yourself that you're probably not going to use every month, by all means, you make your choice. But I don't want.
I wish it was only $150. It's more like $500 to $700, and if it's a family plan, it's more like $1,000 to $1,400, right? Like exactly. that's where those numbers are. That's really, the numbers are more staggering than that, And you were real careful in telling people, like, it's not a socialist program, because we don't want people to think we're socialist or anything like that. But let me tell you, so again, I think that's a whole nother marketing thing about how they're making poor people in underserved communities be like, I don't want any socialism, right?
Yeah.
We just had this PPP plan, right? COVID-19 happened, pretty much shut people down. Folks couldn't, businesses couldn't operate or whatever. And so they passed like what, a $3 trillion bill or something in the federal government, in order to like help businesses, kind of go afloat, right? Once I grew up and got a job, they told me I needed to make sure I saved 6 months worth of savings in case an emergency happened, so I can cover myself or whatever. But it was like 2 months in, and people were crying, right? And now we're slowly finding out how many millionaires and billionaires benefited from this program, and that's all taxpayer money, right? Because they have like all these kind of tax cuts where their tax brackets are low, right? So they had no problem taking $60 million here, $10 million there, whatever. And that's a form of socialism, taking everybody's money and giving it to you because you think you need it. And again, it's another marketing thing to have poor people and underserved communities think that, oh no, socialism is a bad thing. But when, they're getting bailouts from the government, which is taxpayer dollars, right? So we need to, and I understand your concern about that sounding like a bad word, but people really need to understand that, socialism is what's happening when big companies are getting PPP loans, right? They're the ones who should have been able to survive COVID because they're multi-billion-dollar corporations. Why are you getting a loan? And, they even had to go back and try to figure it out for smaller businesses. I applied for one because I have a small office, and I applied for one, and I was like, this is just way too many hoops for this little bit of money that y'all trying to give me. They weren't trying to give me like, $1 million. It was like $6,000. And I was like, yo, y'all finna make me do all of this to get $6,000. I'll be all right. Luckily I was able to just not have to deal with the hassle of it because, it was like, you don't know if it's going to be a loan. You don't know if you're going to have to pay it back. You needed to make sure you was going to be able to get those employees back. And I'm still so terrified of COVID. I have not let anybody else come to work with me. Right. I'm thinking if you come into work, you'll be in the office by yourself and tell me what day you're there so I don't show up, right? Just because, this thing is changing all the time. So I understand your concern with the socialism, but I really would like people to get educated about what it is that means. And it's really just people helping each other out. And that's what we need to do, right? That's what we need to do. At least that's what I think. Right?
No, you're funny. It's funny you say that because I was thinking about a reference my professor made about it. We were having a discussion about politics, and he made fun of the fact that he was like, I just think it's crazy everybody sidelines the fact that Jesus was a socialist. And I say, why do you say that? And he was like, I mean, the man was sharing his fish, his wine, his bread. He did everything he could to help everybody. So obviously that's the model we're looking for. So I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So we talked about healthcare, which is, one of those things that everyone's concerned about. We talked about like teachers, the other teachers and getting their pay and more money for students and everything, and the environment. That's another big thing here, right? So, I wonder, I'm gonna say y'all wonderful president, right? I guess I have to claim him every now and then. He decided to deregulate like a lot of things, right? Big sugar was one of them, right? And people, they don't want to talk about it now and act like it's not going on. But like last year, we had problems with red algae, blue algae, green algae, all of these things. And all of that happened as a result of a lot of the runoff from like Big Sugar, right? So I know you have a Green New Deal plan that you want to bring for Florida. Talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit and educate the people on how Big Sugar is like, killing the fish and screwing up the Everglades, right? From what I understand.
So our environment, as everybody should know, it is a very fragile one. A lot of we're below sea level. We are prone to climate change and all of its effects. And for me, that really highlights the fact that we have to focus more on our environment and how we actually address and protect and apply the infrastructure to maintain and support it. So when we're looking at like Big Sugar and stuff, even, and I don't want to make this sound bad, but Kristen Jacobs, she was able to pass her last bill before she passed away, with the, what is it called? Oh my gosh. It's like a basin almost. I don't know the name. It's going to come to me later. But basically, it's supposed to collect all of that runoff water with the blue algae and all that. And it's supposed to kind of help prevent that from going into the East Coast portion of the ocean. So that, to me, even though it was a great success as a Democrat to pass something in a Republican legislature, I just hope there's nobody taking offense to the fact that that is a Band-Aid solution, because it doesn't hold people accountable. And then people can talk about the Clean Waterways Act. That has nothing to do with anything clean water related. That was something to save face. And I want
a marketing thing too. They give it all these great names and you think it has something to do with clean water, and it has absolutely nothing to do with clean water. So educate the people a little bit about it so they'll know it. So the next time they see it, hear about it, they'll really have the right kind of perspective on what that's doing.
So the Clean Waterways Act was like a plethora of bills put together, and it's supposed to address a lot of the things I was saying: infrastructure, the support, and how we're going to continue to maintain best practices. So the only thing that I saw it really do that was beneficial was the fact that it raised a lot of the penal fines and codes and enforcement for the polluters and the big industries. Now, I think that provides teeth, but I think the other thing we're missing is the fact that our agriculture and our environment are intersected in our state, especially in our economics. So when we're looking at our environment, we have to look at agricultural practices at the end of the day. We have to look at, and this is not a sexy topic, but dirt and soil are important. We need every bit of it. So our agriculture, we need to, as a state, implement these best management practices. They already have one, but we need it to be updated yearly. We need it to be enforced and have oversight and accountability in how that is being conducted. And that's where I believe the agriculture commissioner should have some additional oversight with that, and not only the governor. And that's just so, there's more than one pair of eyes is always better for something. And on top of that, we need to look at, I believe that basin was a good purpose, but I feel like now we need to implement it in another way. Right now, our water sources is not going in the right direction that nature intended. And I understand that because of our whole developing society. But that's where we're faltering as a state, because we need to remember that a lot of our water sources are coming naturally from our own freshwater sources and are coming from upstate, and they have to flow, or else we don't have an Everglades down here. Right. So we need to at least talk about what is the proper way of stopping and allowing water to flow? What is some infrastructure we can put in place so we can at least support its initiative of collecting and preserving fresh filtered water? And on top of it, we need to look at the one thing I really thought was weird was the Clean Waterways Act it has funding for the Everglades, but it's not the funding I was hoping for in terms of the Everglades is fragile, but there's also not enough of water to make it an Everglades. So we need to talk about how our Everglades is actually a marsh filtration system for our water supply. And that right there is one of the biggest economic things we could do as a state to save taxpayer dollars, is by actually reinforcing that process and creating that same basin over by Lake Okeechobee at the bottom of it. So we're collecting more water as this is happening. We're not just wasting it. It's not just going into the ocean. These are ways that we can at least work with the environment instead of against it. And I mean, the same thing applies not only to the Clean Waterways Act and stuff, but also our urban development. I was recently listening to a study from Florida Atlantic University of a professor saying that, it's in the best interest of the state and everybody dealing with climate change to think about architecture and infrastructure with more greenery within it. So we are more resilient in terms of, how we're addressing weather anomalies and climate change. And that right there is, just a simple answer as well. Like, just require people who are building new things to look at the environment more than just the profit. Because I mean, if somebody's gonna have to maintain it, and it's usually gonna be the city. So we have to find ways to prevent wasteful tax spending. And on top of it, we need to implement common sense solutions, not only just money, but more oversight. And when I say money, not just fines and stuff, we need to talk about, what are some other ways to really hit hard at people to know that this is not something we're condoning. Money's great, but there's something way bigger than that. And I've been thinking about it. So I mean, once I get an answer for it, I'll let you guys know. But a lot of the environment, though, I feel like there's a lot of different practices we can do. But a lot of it, I think, are truly common sense, but it has to be involved with the scientists and listening to that community.
Right. And yeah, the environment's important. And, and you were talking about big business and, infrastructure and all this. I live out west, right? I live like west of I-75, not as far as US 27, but I live out west. And I know, and I watch the neighborhood just kind of grow. And there are a lot of places like, and there's these cows that I think they keep moving, right? Because, you get like that, you get tax breaks if you have a farm, right? Like, like a farm, right? So there's all these open areas of land. There's some cows that are kind of hanging out on it, and I think they classified as a farm. The next thing you know, the cows have moved, and now they're building, townhomes or like, single family homes that are like starting at $500,000 and that type of thing, right? That's another one of the things that's happening. Like, this area used to have a lot of greenery. Now it's like, it's just becoming so congested, right? Like, it's like all this apartment, you're taking out, a lot of what we need to kind of keep the ecosystem going. So that's another one of those abuse things that I think are happening, right? They're taking advantage of a lot of tax breaks, tax credits, and they're doing things that's taken away from the environment. Because, and also I remember when Chrome Avenue used to be like swamp, right? Like you literally couldn't, there was no street, there was no, and now, they figure out a way to kind of fill it with stuff so the house don't sink, and they're like building homes. And, and that you can't just keep building, right? I think like at some point you have to stop building if you really care about the environment.
And you're absolutely right. And that's where, whatever we have now, we need to sustain, adapt it, and then maintain it, because honestly, there's not a lot of Florida left.
Right.
It's that point where, our legislatures in Florida are privatizing parts of the beach just so people have, land for their property. So, I mean, those are little factors we have to consider. And urban sprawl is such a big threat to Florida. And I think that's why we need a Florida Green New Deal. And that's just because it can protect our jobs. It can protect the economy. It can ensure that we're helping the environment and working with it. But, most importantly, it shows that we are progressing as a society. And I deeply hold the value of the fact that, the next generation has to, you're hoping for the betterment of what's coming next. You're not looking to regress. And that to me is what we need to do, is really push and move Florida forward.
Yeah, we need to push and move forward, but we don't have to keep building in order to do that, right?
No.
We can kind of just be like, okay, we good, right? Let's just kind of work with what we have. Yeah. And the other thing that I didn't, that I found out about at a legislative wrap up last year, Cindy Polo was talking about, is it called like fracking or blasting or something like that? That happens? Okay, so I remember and I used to tell people this and they didn't believe me. I would sit in my house and like around 10:30, 11 o'clock, my house would shake, right? And I was just like, yo, my house shaking. And I would tell people that, they're like, girl, you crazy, your house not shaking. And then so I go to this legislative wrap up last summer, and she was like, yeah, they be doing that blasting and all that. I'm like, oh, that's why my house is shaking. Tell the people about that and what it is that you would do to try to prevent that, or like at least kind of slow that down. I don't know, because my house literally shakes like every other day around 10:30, 11 o'clock.
And that's honestly why I believe that the best solution to this is to ban fracking and oil drilling and oil exploration in the state of Florida as a whole, just because of, you being a prime example of it, how intrusive it is in our community. But fracking as a whole basically is just the process of using highly pressurized water to break up the sedimentary rock, to get access to whatever non-renewable energy that is below. So it, one, uses a lot of water, so it's wasteful. Two, we are destroying our filtration system, which is our entire bedding for the state, basically. And then three, there's really there's no real beneficial result at the end, just because once they're done, they're never going to be able to come back. It's
Yeah.
like they've done their job and it's done. So you've destroyed whatever and you're not going to do anything about it. And that is what happened. I mean, when oil was such a big thing, and it's still prevalent in the deserts over in the western portion of
The Southwest, yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, to have that in Florida, I think would be a disservice, but also shows a lack of care and understanding for how fragile Florida is in terms of, I mean, the water is the biggest thing, but on top of it, we're below. And I can only imagine all the other variables that would kind of bring up if we started fracking and destroying what's left of what we have. And honestly, the oil drilling and exploration, all that is still happening because of this presidency. But it's up to the state to really prioritize the fact that we care more about what makes Florida Florida than the money that can make Florida whatever we're hoping it to be. Because I think we're at a prime time within the society of Florida as a whole. So honestly, the answer is to just ban it altogether. We don't need it. Our ecosystem's too fragile and it's not worth it.
All right. So we talked about some good things. Is there anything else that you want to do when you become like the next Florida senator for District 33?
Yes, there are a lot of things. My biggest thing is really making sure that I'm that representative that everybody can, know. I think that's where a lot of people lack. When I joined this race, a lot of people didn't know who their representative was. And I'm just speaking on the Senate side of things, not even just the House. But for me, knowing that our representative has been here since my childhood and has represented me, and that kind of basically totals 13 years of life, that is a concern because it just shows that people aren't active and engaged within the political process. And the fact that Broward County has some of the most historically Black minority and marginalized communities, we have to allow that community and that population to have a voice. It's honestly just a disservice if we were to allow, half of Broward County to speak for the other half. Right. But I wanted to make sure once I get into the seat that I give the people what they're looking for, which is representation, whether they ask for it or not. I want them to know that there's somebody fighting for them. Nobody believes that there's somebody here fighting. I make calls every day, and it's sad to say that I'm the first person to make it. But other than that, on top of the active and engaged representation, I want to bring both new progressive leadership. And I say that because, one, I'm taking on the incumbent. We need something bold. I think this is a statement of being bold. But on top of it, a lot of the things we're fighting for are bold in themselves, making sure we have an education system that is adequate and equitable, an environment that's protected, and just the betterment of our state as a whole. So on top of that as well, I want to make sure that that bold new progressive leadership really does resonate with people, because a lot of the things that are progressive, in my opinion, are really just common practice that people are hoping for. They're just really scared to talk about it. And if it really takes somebody to step out of the bounds to challenge the status quo, I want people to know that I will be that person to speak up for them, regardless of, my status or who I am, because at the end of the day, I have to be genuine to what I believe in and who I'm representing. And that's really one of the biggest keystones for me, is that genuineness. I know there are people who believe this campaign season is all about money and name recognition and stuff. For me, that doesn't matter. I feel like there's way more people than there is money. And if we can make a coalition of people, I think that right there is a movement in itself, and you can't stop that. And absolutely. That's what matters. So for me, it's just making sure people notice that politics isn't just about old people. Politics isn't just about one particular group of people. It's about all of us, and we should all have a seat at the table, regardless of age, race, and personal views. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to push our society forward. We're not trying to harm anybody in the process.
Yeah,
so
this is definitely this is definitely an amazing time. There's a lot, a lot going on, a lot of changes. People have had chance to self-reflect. Also, people have become aware of certain social issues that they weren't familiar with. I mean, COVID-19 pretty much like showed a lot of people how certain industries are fragile. It kind of also made people realize that they need to just kind of slow down, and that sometimes it's okay to just do that. that, even though there is some stress and anxiety of like what's really going on, but it gave you an opportunity to kind of slow down. We also had the incident of George Floyd, losing his life in front of in front of everybody like that. And it brought about an awareness that some people didn't have, right? Like, Black people have been screaming at the top of their lungs that, listen, they're literally killing us, right? And people like, no, it's all in your head. You're making it up, right? But when we saw an example of it, right, people had to really just kind of face like certain truths. Uncomfortable ones to some, but really, and then it kind of opened up some wounds for others. This definitely is a pivotal time, and I think it's definitely an opportunity for more progressive ideas, because people are asking for all kind of reform, and they want to see things done another way, right? Because people are doing things the same old is not going to work anymore, right? It's just not it's not going to work. People are demanding more, and it's awesome that you have like all these really good ideas that you want to bring to the people in your district. So you also have a responsibility as a state senator to share information with your constituent. How do you plan on doing that? Because what's the breakup? Like I'm not completely familiar with your area, but you may have some people in your district that's not social media savvy and all that stuff, you know what I mean? They might not have a Twitter page or anything like that. How because that's also your responsibility, is provide the information to the people in your district. How do you plan on doing that?
So not to brag or anything, I just put it out there. I am one of the only candidates in my race who actually have a website. And I know right there, you said not tech friendly, but I want everybody to know you can access this website, your phone, your laptop, ask your grandkids, do something. But I am out there on the simplest of ways. Now, in terms of social media and stuff, I'm still getting my footing in it. And I think that's weird to say because this is my generation's realm. But honestly, it is weird in terms of talking about information like this on social media, because I'm not used to seeing it in this way, in such a political way or informative way. So I'm learning just as much as everybody who's following me is watching me learn. What I really try to do though is when I'm informing people through social media, it's not just about the facts. I try to give them other things that are of interest but relate to the conversation, because everything intersects with one another. And if you could show people that right there is already pushing people to think and change the way they're viewing their whole life and world as a thing. But when we're looking at other ways of getting it out, I've been trying to actually reach out with our small local news outlets, just because local news is so important. They break the biggest stories. They're the ones who give CNN and MSNBC all the stories that we think they thought of. And that to me is, pivotal. I try whatever I can to really reach out to these people, because not only is it a part of the community and I could speak with a specific group of people, but again, it's just another outlet that's giving the same information. We're working together. And that's what really matters with disseminating information. Who are you working with to really let people know that you're talking? So social media is great. I mean, it's always there forever. But I think honestly, press, news outlets, all those things are still such key pivotal things, because they make up the brunt of our small local communities. And to neglect them would be, again, a disservice from me and everybody else, because I mean, what else do we have if not the news?
Right. And I also want to let you know, if you have like Haitian people in your area, you need to get on a Haitian radio station and let them know what you're about. That's how they get their information. My mother's in Miami, and there's a Haitian radio station there that she sits to and listens to all day. And that's how she gets all her information. And sometimes she's telling me stuff that I didn't know, because I'm not really big on local news, because the news just kind of drives me crazy. So I read more than I watch, right? But she'll be like, Sonny, did you hear this happen? And I'm like, okay, I heard it happen. So if you got Haitian people in your area, I'm just letting you know, try to find a Haitian radio station that kind of emits there, and let them know what you're doing, because I really do think you're doing like some awesome things, and you have some really good ideas, and people should be aware of it. It's really, really impressive. So I wanted to the last thing I'm going to ask you about, and then we'll get into your social media, and I'll ask you your one tough question, the word on the street stuff, right? So homelessness, is that I think that's a big thing in your area. Is there anything that you can do as a state senator to bring awareness? Well, we know it's there, to kind of bring some funding to the people in that community. Because I saw something today, and I'm not sure if it's, and I don't like to spread rumors, but every now and then I get some information, not sure if it's true or not, that there was a voucher that gave like some 200 people a place to stay. And all of a sudden today they got a letter like, y'all got to get out. We don't have no more space for you. And they had to figure it out. Like, how you going to figure it out? They probably still haven't worked anywhere new. So are you familiar with that? And what can we do so people aren't like given, you know, a letter and tell them to get out the next day?
Well, I mean, to go back to the root of this evil, it's really the fact that the legislature has raided the Sadowski Fund, you know, almost every legislative session. This is the first legislative session that I believe the Sadowski Fund was not raided and is actually going to be used for its intended purpose of actually providing affordable housing within the community. Not only
so for the people who don't know what the Sadowski Fund is, can you give them, educate them a little bit, and then you could tell us what you were going to say.
Yeah, so the Sadowski Fund is basically the Affordable Housing Fund. It was established a long time ago, and it's basically something that the legislature has to keep fully funded and to use for the purposes solely of affordable housing. Now, that's not the case because they have used it in the past for their, in Florida politics lingo, they use it for their turkey projects. So a lot of it is, you know, being misappropriated. Other than that, one of the things that really needs to be done is to issue a state tenant bill of rights. And I say that because if anybody's ever looked at our constitution or our state statutes, the police have a police bill of rights, people.
They do.
So if the police have a bill of rights for themselves, I believe us as a society deserves a tenant's bill of rights, because housing is also a human need. But on top of it, it's pivotal to what you do in your life, especially in Florida, where your zip code can define you as a whole.
Yes.
So for me, if we were to actually have a tenant's bill of rights similar to California, I believe that these could provide the protections for renters. We can at least protect, and I say this because renters are now 50%. I believe they grew last quarter about 30%. In terms of, you know, real estate. So they're becoming a big facet of our Florida economy. And that's where we have to step in and regulate it. Not like how New York did, and we end up having a bunch of brick houses, but in a way where it's similar to California, where it's equitable and equality based. And I say that because when you're looking at
that happened in California, did that because a lot of people were getting priced out. You know, there was a couple different reasons why that was happening. People were getting priced out of the market, and they had like a whole issue of homelessness. They just didn't have a lot of rights. In Florida, that's happening too, right? Because, you know, like some of this rent stuff, I'm like, how you pay that with a regular job and without 5 roommates? Like if you have like a regular, normal, you know, I'm just gonna get a gig, you can't afford to live on your own. You're renting a room out of someone's house, or you're still living with your parents or something like that. It's really, it's difficult. It's really expensive to live here.
And again, just the reason why we need tenants bill of rights, people, when the coronavirus struck, I'm currently renting, and I live close to my university. And after the coronavirus, they dropped it by, I believe, 30 to 40% of what the rent is. So that just shows to me that regardless of economics and demand and all that good stuff, if you can make it affordable now because of the circumstances, can you imagine if they did that before?
Right. Because people were just not going to pay, right? Because I knew some people who decided, it's like, yo, check this out. Y'all can't kick me out until whatever date it was. You know, they pushed the date back, like, I think twice. But they were like, I can't afford to pay. I'm not going to work. Like, you know, what do you want me to do?
Now, and to address the affordable housing too, the last thing I want to say, and I think this is the simplest thing, one of the biggest factors in renting, even if it's not an apartment complex, is your credit. And I bring that up because people will deny you access to housing if your credit is bad. But let's say you as a person, an individual, have the money to afford it and you are willing to dish out additional cash for it. I believe in that tenants bill of rights, it needs to address the fact that nobody, even a condo association, who are the main people who are very familiar with this vagrancy, your credit will not close that door for you. If you have the money to access, that should be the only thing. And if you mess up, there's already a process. We're going to evict you. But other than that, we shouldn't make it more complicated. Credit should not determine where you live.
And the credit isn't even bad. Sorry, the credit isn't even bad because the person was evicted before, right? It could just be anything, right? You could
Yeah.
have had because I found out the other day that I had a medical bill on my credit report. The bill was like $52, right? I was like, I didn't even remember that I owed that bill. I'm like, dude, if y'all had called me or whatever, I would have paid you $52. Like, why do I have a medical bill for $52 on my credit report? But the other thing is that like I'm talking about a bill that was $52, but people who have had to go to the emergency room, you know, a lot of people's credit is ruined because of, you know, medical expenses, right? And I was one of those people. I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I remember like I had a medical bill that was, I had health insurance and I still got a medical bill for $140,000. I spent like, I was like, y'all, I'm not even trying to pay you people. I'm not going to figure it out. Y'all need to talk to the insurance company. So imagine I have health insurance and I still got a bill for $140,000. Insanity, right? And so a lot of people's credit is ruined for like health insurance, you know, like medical situation. And can you imagine you can't find a place to live because you had some emergency or something happen to you that you couldn't control, and now you have no house, you
And,
know, that type
and
of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I personally have had this issue, and can you imagine me being young as it is? I don't have established credit like that, like any 35-year-old or something. But
Right,
I mean, to just have the door closed in my face and I don't have bad credit, no credit at all, and for
right.
you to tell me that no, but I have the money and I'm willing to pay you more money to live here,
Mhm.
I just think it's outrageous. And
Yeah,
and
yeah. When I
that,
went to law school, I had to have someone co-sign for my apartment too, because I couldn't get an apartment. They were like, I'm like, what? But I'm about to be a lawyer. Like, how I'm not how
exactly.
that's not a sign of an irresponsible person. Like, you know what I mean? And like, if you're kind of looking at this, like, it ain't. But they were like, no. So I literally had to get someone to co-sign for the apartment for me, else I would have had nowhere to live. So yeah, that's definitely something that that's really important. Okay, so your word on the word, you know, you've already said it. You're 21 years old, right? And people are like, you're so young. Like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to get this job? Go get some more life experience and then come try to play with the grown-ups. Okay. So what do you have to say to that?
So I love the ageist remarks, and I say that because it shows that young people have never had the opportunity to prove their worth and to show that they can make a difference and that age is truly only a number. I mean, our Florida Constitution says if you are 21 years of age, you can run for an elected office. That alone shows that even back in the day, they thought young people had the chance to make a difference. So to not see young people active in this is sad, because we deserve a seat at the table just as much as anybody else, because it's our generation coming forward. I mean, even if I'm not the biggest seat, just give me a seat, a little plate.
Right. And you're a voice. I mean, you represent a significant segment of the population of people that are being represented.
Yes. So
Right.
for me, I believe not only have we not given the opportunity, but you have to look at the beneficial aspects of youth. And it's not the fact that I don't know anything. It's not because I'm naive. It's the fact that I have the malleability to sit there and not conform to an ideology I've processed for the last 40 years. I'm 21 years old. I'm still growing. I'm still changing. I'm still learning. And I'm willing to not allow my views to compromise, you know, my civic duty of serving the public. If my community were, I mean, if they don't agree with me, vote me out. But at the end of the day, if I'm saying something that is cogent and sound, I believe that, you know, why not give me the benefit of the doubt? But other than that, we have to realize too, there is no degree, there is not any life experience that can tell you how to run 150,000 or a million or even two people. You can have a human resource management degree and all that. But again, like somebody would say, you need the experience now to understand what you were taught. Now, that's a catch 22 within itself. So for me, I think we have to get over the idea of, you know, looking at the cover of the book and really seeing what's inside of it to really judge it. But other than that, we have to understand that young people are not just young. We can do things. I mean, everybody that has raised us and brought us into this world or has pushed us forward, they were looking out in our best interest and for societies. So I feel like, why not? And if anybody were to say it's because you don't know how politics works, I've only been doing it for the last 2-3 months running, and completely get it. It is shady, it is dirty, but I don't feel like that can stop me from creating the change and to speak up and to be a part of this crazy system to really make sense of it all. And regardless of my age, it's encouraging to see, even if I wasn't doing it. I have a friend, Elijah Manley, who you'll be on with tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.
Yes, he is a great example of it, that young people need to see young people doing the things that we're not seen and capable of. Because if they're not imagining themselves in it, how is the next generation going to step up to the plate? And that's the biggest concern. And so I respect everybody's views when they tell me that you need more life experience. I respect everybody's views when they tell me that maybe you should run in 4 years. I want you to realize something. There is no line. There is no boundaries. There are no borders preventing anybody from standing up and believing that they can fulfill the civic duty of, like the Constitution of Florida says, to balance the budget. That is the main priority. And I promise you I'm good with numbers. But other than that, I have a lot of views and a lot of ideas that I think that would be beneficial for our community. And a lot of people I would agree with would have the same views as me. We're just all waiting for somebody to say it. And we don't need a corporate interest person. We don't need somebody backed by dark money. We need somebody, again, who has genuine intentions of really working for the people. I mean, and I'm sorry to sound cliche, but AOC is a good example of that. People didn't have faith in her, and she has proved everybody wrong along the way. And if I have to be the first example to set that stone in place, I promise you I will, because there's nobody who's going to tell me or another 18-year-old, you do not belong in politics because you don't have the experience. Well, how did you get here? What did you do? Why were you, good enough to have the accountability of this position? So these are the questions people have to ask. It's not about my age. It's what am I bringing to the table? What are his visions? And does he seem like he has the capacity to do it? And in my opinion, I do. I have the energy, I have the passion, and I have the knowledge and the passion of learning to continue to grow and move forward with our society and how we address our future laws and issues. So that would be my answer to everybody.
Yes, no, and and you've put in the work. The tribe has invested in you. They have to trust that they did all the right things and taught you all the right things and taught you everything that you needed to know in order for you to go forward and and just kind of represent well. So tell everybody how to get in touch with you, how they can volunteer, how they can send you money, and all of that kind of stuff.
So I know campaign season is different, but I want you guys to know you guys can always reach me at stephenmeza.com. My personal cell phone number is there, so you can always call me if you have a question or concern. I'm always willing and open to address it. Email me if you'd like. It's stephenmeza@stephenmeza.com. All my social media is at @electstephenmeza. And I wanted to just sign off and tell everybody thank you so much for watching. And if you are hoping to help or volunteer, this is not the typical campaign season. We're not knocking on doors. But what I will ask of you to do is to just text all of your friends and to make it a chain mail, because that's what we're doing now too. We're text banking. Stephen Meza is our candidate running for Florida State Senate. Put my website and send it and tell people to just know who their candidates are. I'm not hoping for just a vote. I'm hoping to know that I've already set the right path forward of creating an active and engaged environment by making people want to know their candidates, regardless if the others do or don't. So I just want everybody to know you have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about me, and I'm always available if you feel like that's still not enough. So please don't be scared to reach me. I'm always willing and able, and I'm happy that I got the chance to do this with everybody.
And that's STEVENMEZA.com.
Yes.
All right. So have your closing remarks. I'm not going to tell you do it in 30 seconds or 60 seconds. Do your closing remarks because I want you to have the last word. It was truly a pleasure talking to you. So so you can still request your vote by mail ballots up until, and they have to be submitted back by July the 20th of 2020. If you go to browardsoe.org, it's a big old flash to tell you requested. I used to have the phone number. I don't have it right now. I'm so sorry. But go to browardsoe.org to request your vote by mail. I believe they did send out a card that you can request it. Those of you who requested it already, you've probably got your ballots. They started coming out like a couple of days ago in order for you to vote, but you still have up until July the 20th of 2020 to request and send it back, because COVID-19 is up and down. We were doing good. Now we're doing bad. We don't know what we're going to look like on August the 18th on election day. And we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to vote. I think early voting is from August 8th through the 6th. to the 15th or 16th, something like that. It's early
Yeah,
voting.
you're right around the
Election day is August 18th. So have your closing remarks and then tell everybody when to vote for you.
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Stephen Meza. I'm 21 years old. I'm the youngest candidate running for the Florida State Senate in District 33 here in Broward County. And I decided to run this year because I believe we deserve bold, new progressive leadership to make the change that we deserve. And we are so actively looking for an active and engaged representative. And I'm hoping to provide that for you guys. And if you believe in accessible, affordable healthcare, education that is actually providing what we need to our generation, and an environment that is protected and safeguarded, I ask you to vote for me. I ask you to look at your vote as a vote for the future and our generations. So again, I thank everybody for showing up tonight. Again, you can always reach me, StephenMeza.com if you need to. And I'm just so happy I got the chance to do this with you, Sandra. So thank you again for the opportunity.
No, thank you. The pleasure was all mine. The pleasure was all mine. Have a good night.
You too, love.
Bye-bye.